Welcome back, adventurers. If you have spent any amount of time underwater when playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e, you'll know that the combat feels a little bit like this. Now, the reason for that is because, frankly, underwater combat in 5e was designed to be difficult and deadly, and at least for me, it's just not my favorite. So today, let's talk about how to make it just a little bit better. So let's dive in. No? Anyone? First of all, we need to understand underwater combat in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Now, I'm not going to read them verbatim, but here are the three core understandings. If you don't have a swim speed, you make melee attacks with disadvantage unless you use a dagger, javelin, short sword, spear, or trident. If you make a ranged weapon attack, you automatically miss if it's outside the weapon's normal range, and you always have disadvantage unless you use a crossbow, a net, or a weapon that is thrown like a javelin. And lastly, if you're fully submerged, you have resistance to fire. Now that's all fine and dandy. Some of it's a little specific, but I get it. I think weapon attacks should be at disadvantage because if you've ever tried running underwater, you know it's hard. Your body creates a lot of drag in something as dense as water, and so would other things like maces or hammers or even your armor. And for ranged attacks, well, even bullets get stopped by water after just a few feet, and the fire thing is just kind of obvious. So what do I mean then when I say that it's just not fun? Well, let's think about it. You're already swimming, so you're stuck at your swim speed, which for most characters is 15 feet or less. This means you're already playing at a handicap, which again, it makes sense. It should be hard, but it should also be fun. So put yourself in the shoes of your players. Almost all weapons have disadvantage. Ranged attacks are completely nipped, and everyone without a swim speed is going at half speed. And spells that require verbal components would require players to open their mouths underwater, which I know there's no official ruling on spellcasters underwater since technically it's not written that you can't cast spells underwater. So you as a dungeon master can rule that however you want. Now, all of those drawbacks amount to lots of missed dice rolls simply from rolling at disadvantage, which leads to slowed combat on top of slowed movement, and ultimately growing frustration from all the players at the table where what started as a challenge is now a task or a chore. So how do you fix it? How do you get through that slogfest of underwater combat? Well, there are spells like water breathing that help get rid of the whole drowning thing, and if you're prepared, you might be able to collect the right weapons so that you don't have disadvantage or stuff like that, but you're still limited on movement and weapon choice. So now is the part where you as a DM get to be creative and really ask yourself, is this combat experience meant to feel like any other encounter? Should it be a little easier? Or do you want it to feel like a challenge and make the characters work for it? Now, if you want them to never want to experience underwater combat again, and this is a one-time thing, and you want to show them how deadly underwater encounters are in your world, then I'd say the system works as intended. But unless your players want this type of session already, or they want an encounter that's going to be very, very challenging, it's really going to feel like an uphill battle 90% of the time. So what I would suggest is to give them the ability to breathe or swim underwater as an option. Now, what I mean is that there are magic items like Mariner's Armor that can grant them that. Or you can do it in story by having them meet a priest or a sorcerer or whatever that grants them those powers. Or even better yet, they get a mermaid's kiss, which, as legends say, keeps you from drowning. Something cool like that is just thematic and ties into the story. Do that, and now they can swim at normal speed, attack without disadvantage, they can speak, they can cast spells, and overall, it'll just help move combat much faster. Now, that's just my opinion as a DM. I rule at the table that combat should only last as long as the story needs it to. Once combat is no longer necessary and they've already won, I just move on. That may or may not work at your table. Some players love the combat and they love taking their time and looting the bodies and thinking about the combat in a strategic way because that's the sort of thing that this game brings to them. It just checks off those boxes for them. Now, all of that helps balance some of the mechanics, but overall, not much has changed as far as making it more fun, right? So like with any battle map or any encounter, there are some key things to think about. Is the terrain evolving? Are there multiple types of enemies to keep things interesting and fun? Are there any twists that make it chaotic and engaging? For example, adding a whirlpool that throws players 30 feet in a random direction on the map already heightens the experience. Now, if you make that whirlpool phase in and out of existence and appear in a random location every round, well, now you have chaos. You can have hot and cold currents that cause fire and cold damage, or currents that act like conveyor belts. You can have cave systems with air pockets, underwater plants that heal 1d4 hit points. There's so many different creative ways that you can make the battlefield more than just an endless blue expanse. Now, if you throw in some unique enemy types too, you start with grunts, one sounds a horn, and then a few rounds later some mages show up, or a giant shark, or whatever floats your boat. Still no? Okay, sorry. You can also make the combat start above water on a ship or an island and then have that ship sink, or the island get submerged in a storm, and then move into a second stage of the battle. That way they get the best of both worlds and help mitigate some of those mechanic losses they take the moment they are submerged. Now, for a real surprise, you can throw in a twist. They wipe the floor with the Kuotoa thinking things are going to be easy, and then suddenly a marriage shows up angry at the commotion, or a Sahuagin host that takes them prisoner at spear point. Now, those twists and turns and moments of uncertainty and those elements of chaos are what will make that underwater session stand out. On top of that, some underwater ruins with a puzzle hidden in there would also make for some extra underwater fun that just elevates the overall experience. Now, remember, at the end of the day, you're playing a game and a challenge is only going to go so far. If it becomes too hard, then players will dread it or want to avoid it in the future. And what we don't want as storytellers and dungeon masters is to make players not want to explore, because otherwise you're cutting off a whole part of your map just because they have PTSD over one encounter, and now suddenly you have this whole part of your world that they'll never want to explore again. And I don't know, maybe that's your goal. Now, I think overall what's going to heighten that experience and make that underwater combat much more fun is that, in general, players are used to fighting on the X and Y axis, right? Occasionally they get into some trees or they use the flying spell and now they're flying in 3 dimensions. But for underwater combat, you want to make sure to let them know that they can move up and down as well as forward and backwards and left and right, because now they have a 3-dimensional field to maneuver. And while it may be a little harder to keep track on your part as a dungeon master, maybe, it is part of the fun of the underwater encounters, is being able to move in sort of every direction. Now, I hope this video helps spice up your underwater encounters. Overall, they can be fun. Just be prepared for things to be a little slower unless you step in to mitigate them. And now it's time for some quick shoutouts. Garrett4009 says, I spy with my little eye a Displacer Kitty. In my current campaign, I got them all to make their characters with each other in a group to bounce ideas and establish any relationships as the characters' ideas formed in their head. It also helps that we were all coworkers, so we have a real world relationship too. Yeah, if you can get your friends to play, there's a lot more chemistry that happens at the table, so kudos to you for being able to find that. Disgruntled Bob 2812 says, didn't know Tobias made a cameo in the D&D movie. That was his mother in there, if you didn't know. Now you do. Donald Trump's cat 2443 says, oh hey, it's Tobias. Well, oh hey, it's Donald Trump's cat. Now, if you were paying attention in today's video, leave a timestamp in the comments down below with where you saw Tobias in this video, and you just might get shouted out in the next one. So let me know in the comments down below what you do to make your underwater games more fun. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time, adventurers.